So let me start by asking, haven't we heard enough at this point about yet another company being breached by an APT? And haven't we really heard enough about our personal data being put at risk by a breach of some company that might hold our personal data? Well, that's why you're here. I'm passionate about trying to put an end to that. Hi, I'm Chaz. I'm a lead program manager in the Windows and Devices group. And we're going to talk about Application Guard. And we're going to talk about how Application Guard has been designed to defend against these attacks that we're seeing today. So, how many of you have come here because you've heard about Application Guard, maybe at Ignite, and you want to learn more about it? All right. And how many of you had heard about Application Guard before? Maybe you took a look at it with Windows Insiders, and you really want to deep dive, and you want to know more about how to deploy it. Let's see that show of hands. Okay, that's a good mix. We have a lot to go through. I want to show you some demos as well. So I'll jump in, but we're all friends here. So if you have a question, just come up to the mic as we go along. If you're going on too long or it's too deep, then I might just ask you to hold it until the end. But because we have so much content, it's probably good to ask the question in context of where we're at in the presentation. So if I were to ask you, are attacks getting any less destructive these days? You'd probably say no, right? If I were to ask you, have attacks got better or worse, over the last 5 years? Have they changed in the last 2 years? What might you say to that? Certainly the word of the day is ransomware. We didn't see that 2 years ago. We didn't see these attacks that are focused on, burning down the enterprise. This is very troubling, and based on that, we made a decision within Windows to come up with defenses within the platform to try to defend against these exact types of attacks. So you all know this graph well, and our attackers know this graph well, and this playbook that they're using is quite reliable. But our goal is to defend against our network and our enterprises. We need to change the attacker playbook. We need to render this playbook that they're using obsolete. The issue is, at the beginning of that attack graph, what does the attacker do? They send an email to some number of people within the enterprise, and you might click on it. Well, not you guys, you're not going to click on it, but I would guess that some amount of your users in your enterprise may, and it doesn't take a lot. It takes a few, and then what happens? The attacker, gains a foothold on one endpoint, and you folks in this room know the rest. They want to move laterally, and they use their tools to do that. It only takes 12% to really allow the attackers to gain that foothold, and they probably don't even need that much. And it happens fast, like in 4 minutes. What can you do in 4 minutes to try to defend against this? So who uses these types of attack techniques? Well, they're used in the real world, right? So this particular attacker, Strontium, you probably know better as APT28. This is Microsoft's name for that particular APT. This particular APT is the one who is suspected of being responsible for the German parliament breach as well as NATO. They use this technique successfully, and this is exactly the type of group that we want to stop. So when they craft a mail, the mails are getting more and more convincing. And like looking at this mail, how many of your users, if they were sent this type of mail, do you think would click on it or suspicions might be raised? You know, certainly German Parliament folks, NATO folks in this case fell for this one, at least, you know, the 12%, or maybe even fewer. And can you see that the URL, and this is the real mail that we actually were able to get with our Windows security response folks. It's going to natoint.com as opposed to nato.int. So that user that's going to fall victim to this probably isn't going to even catch that. And the fact that they even put effort into crafting an URL that the rest of it actually looks like the target page that you're going to land on that day makes it even harder to detect. In that particular user, if they click on that, they're not going to realize what's happening here, and that they're being redirected so quickly from the attacker-controlled site to the actual site that they won't notice. But it's too late. They clicked, they don't realize there's a bunch of evil stuff going on that redirect page that they didn't even notice. And unfortunately, their endpoint gets owned. And then you know the rest, because it's folks like us that usually have to clean up after the fact, and we know it's not cheap to do that, and it's usually highly disruptive to our organizations. So in Windows 7, we introduced the Trusted Platform module. That was really the first step that we took at Microsoft within Windows to try to harden and strengthen the platform. And when we did that, our focus was really on device integrity, though BitLocker for data protection was one of the first features that we enabled with the TPM. So that was a good start. But then in Windows 10, we really focused on adding new features that are focused on really defending the endpoint and trying to thwart some of these attacks. If you have modern hardware, the story is even better, because then you can take advantage of things like virtualization-based security, VBS, as one example, and take advantage of the entire new suite that we have for Windows Defender. So examples are like Device Guard, System Guard, Exploit Guard, and why we're here today talking is Application Guard. You know, so what's changed to get us to the point that we need virtualization-based security and Application Guard? Well, the folks that are doing research and writing exploits, we've noticed over the last 2 years that they're moving down the stack. And the reason that they're doing that is because there's more and more investments being made in browser sandboxing, right? So we're all familiar with that. How many of you follow Pwn2Own? So Pwn2Own, the security conference in Vancouver, where researchers can go in and they can show off their exploits, right? And they're able to get a reward for that. So some of what you see here are actual exploits in the wild, and some are from Pwn2Own on the right side of that graph. So those exploit writers are doing that now because why put in the effort to get a sandbox escape that's not going to give you the system as well? So if you can get a kernel mode exploit, you're going to get through the sandbox, and you're going to be able to get the host itself, right? You're going to get the kernel. And that's what we want to stop. The issue really has been that our traditional platform stack was not designed to defend against these types of attacks. If you can get one exploit on the traditional stack without any of those defenses that we looked at earlier for Windows 10, then you own the endpoint. Right? So in Windows 10, when we started to introduce hardware-based isolation, virtualization-based security, that was our first step in trying to protect the most precious, sensitive components and secrets in the operating system. So you may have heard of Device Guard, you may have heard of Credential Guard. Those are two features that are enabled through virtualization-based security. Now as we look towards Application Guard, we're also using Hyper-V-based virtualization and we're using that to isolate untrusted user activity within the browser. The way we think about this is when you think about VBS and Credential Guard and Device Guard, think of that as the castle within the OS. If an attacker were to get on the machine, we want to make sure that it's difficult for the attacker to get at the things that they want to get. So if we think back to that graph, that attacker playbook, they want to move laterally to be able to compromise the enterprise. If you're running Credential Guard in VBS, a lot of the tools they use are rendered useless because they can't get at the credentials because they're locked in the castle. Now, switching to Application Guard, we think of that more like a jail. It's the place, the dungeon, where your user can go to untrusted websites, and if they're attacked, whatever happens in that dungeon or that jail should stay there until it's closed, and then it goes away. So let's take a quick walkthrough on what the Application Guard experience would look like for the user that was faced with that NATO attack, the attack against NATO by APT28. So here we see that same mail. The user receives it. And because they don't know any better, based on everything that we talked about, they're going to click. But because the administrator in this enterprise has deployed Application Guard in what we call enterprise mode, then when the user clicks the link, Application Guard actually isolates Edge in a separate, isolated environment. So it's not on the host. The same redirection happens, and that's fine. The malware even runs, and they could even have a 0-day, like in the case of APT28, and that's fine as well, because what's it going to compromise? It's going to compromise the Application Guard container, not the host itself. So when the user views the site, they really have no idea that they were just attacked. And they really don't care because that's isolated. So when they close that window and that session goes away, so did that attack. So the host itself is completely isolated through hardware-based isolation in this instance. So that's really the benefit of running Application Guard with that isolation. So that's a quick overview of Application Guard. So now I want to start off with showing you a demo. And this demo is going to be for a feature in Application Guard that we call standalone mode. All right, so I'm running a Windows 10 PC on my Surface, and to run standalone mode, it's something that you can actually do directly. It doesn't require any policy setup, and you can do this yourself if you're a Windows Insider, and we'll talk more about that. If you were to get one of the recent Insider builds, Application Guard is included. And you can, even if you enable Application Guard, and I'll show you how to do that, you could actually run this mode now. So you start up Edge, and you come into Edge, and you hit the top right on the ellipses, and you'll see there's a new option for you called New Application Guard Window. When I click New Application Guard Window, depending on if you're starting it for the first time or if you've had it up and running, you might see that splash screen. So what's going on there is we're creating a new Hyper-V container. It's a Gen 2 container, and that was custom designed to isolate Edge. That's the sole purpose of that container. So you'll notice that there's an Application Guard tag up here at the top left to let the user know that they're browsing in isolation. And there's also a thin orange bar at the top, if you all can see that. That's also an indicator. And then over on the taskbar, you'll notice that there's a shield on Edge. Any applications that might happen to open up while you're browsing in isolation would have that thin orange bar. So you might see us do demonstrations through Ignite where we'll isolate malware that might actually pop up command shells, and look for that thin orange bar on the command shell, and you'll note that that's in isolation. So if you do tests yourself, you can experiment with that. And you'll know you're isolated. So meaning that if there's an attack running there, it's not on the host, it's within the container. Additionally, we added some things for users, recognizing that they're not all security experts. They may want to know more about what this isolated environment is, especially if you're deploying it as administrators within your companies. Users may get put in this isolated environment automatically, and I'm going to show you how that works. We want them to be able to easily identify what's going on here to reduce help desk calls. All right, so you might ask, hey, that's great, Chaz, but what kind of functionality does the user have when they're in isolation? Well, we went to great extents to try to give as much functionality to the user as possible while in that isolated environment, but still with an eye, towards security. Because we know that you would expect that. You would want us to ensure that if we're going to go to the trouble to create the secure environment, that you wouldn't want us to poke holes in that container to enable every user feature that you might expect. Though we understand for users to really be willing to use this within your enterprises, there has to be the basic functionality that they expect. So Clipboard is available. And each of these that I'll talk about, administrators have control over that through group policy. We disable all these by default. You'll go into group policy to set those up, and we'll take a look at that. Printing as well. So you can print if enabled, and you can print to local attached printers, network attached. You can also print as PDF, XPS. And one thing I'd like to note is if you do deploy this, one of the first pieces of feedback you may hear, which is what we heard inside of Microsoft from our users, was, hey, I can't download documents. I'm browsing the web, I'm trying to download documents, and they seem to disappear. You're in a container. So the way you get around that is you can do that print as PDF or XPS, and we opened up a channel to where the user can save those down to their host using that mode. So that's a way to get around that issue. Additionally, users browse to websites frequently, the same ones. So, having cookie persistence and having their web creds persist is something that they would expect. We recognize that, there's many sites out there for, users' personal email that run through some negotiation the first time that they log in, to configure that and to drop a cookie. If the user had to go through that every time they're going to their personal, webmail, you'd be hearing about it, I'm sure. So here's a way that you can address that. And I'll show you in policy where you can enable this. All right, so now we're going to drop in a little more technical to give you background on how this was actually designed and where our containers came from. So just by a show of hands, how many of you have been using server containers like Docker or Azure containers and understand that? Okay, not as many as I would have thought. So the technology that we're using for our client container was born out of the server containers and the Azure-based containers that were built for those scenarios. And why those are effective is because they're leveraging all of the things that you would expect. So, intelligent sharing, experience, being able to isolate different workloads. These are kind of the themes that have been used to create the server containers, and doing that at scale and being able to prove that you actually have isolation. And what type of container gives you workload isolation versus security isolation. This allowed the container team at Microsoft to clearly understand what type of container would be best to use in a scenario like this for security. So we asked, why can't we use them on client to be able to isolate edge or other applications to get that security benefit? So that's what we did. So we're leveraging the power of the server containers to enable this scenario. So this container is, like I said, a next generation. It is type 2 Hyper-V based container, and it gives us pure security isolation. It's using new technology that creates an exact copy of the OS install that's on the client endpoint that the container is running on. So when you saw that splash screen show up saying starting application guard, what's going on there is we'll actually dynamically create a container based on the OS, the image that is sitting on the endpoint. So that's extremely exciting to me. It's exactly what we wanted because it means that we pick up the patch levels of that machine and that you don't have to maintain another OS image in the enterprise that you're pushing out to the endpoints. It's all done automatically. There's nothing that you need to do other than to turn it on. So in addition to the container technology, you're also getting the benefit of next generation networking technology. And that technology is being built, again, for the server container scenarios, but we're also using that on the client endpoint. What that buys us is it gives us isolation. So our container cannot get to the enterprise resources. It can only get to that untrusted network, and we get pure isolation in the networking stack as well. All right, so let's walk through this quickly so you understand exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So when you turn on Application Guard Enterprise Mode, there's going to be some configuration that will be required by the administrator to be able to use that automatic mode where in the case of that APT attack, when your user clicks on a link in a mail, they get put into isolation. So on the left side of the screen, you know, what you see there is the enterprise endpoint. And then on the right side of the screen, you basically see the dance that's going to go on for the container itself and edge and isolation. So you can be an enterprise that's deployed IE11 as your default browser or Edge. In both cases, we're going to launch Edge in isolation in the container when the user's browsing to an untrusted site. And the reason we do that is because Edge is our most secure browser for Microsoft. So if the user's going to a sketchy website, I'd rather have them in Edge than in IE. So that way they have, you know, the full layered defense that we can offer. So in this case, we monitor and force the navigation request. And the way that we do that is you'll notice there is a service up here. And the name of the service here is Hypervisor Security Isolation HVSI service. You know, we just call that the Application Guard service for short. But nonetheless, when the notification of a navigation request comes in and you're running enterprise mode, then that service is going to interrogate the URL. At that point, it's going to take a look in group policy, and it will look up whether or not the navigation request is going to a site that you've deemed to be trusted. And the way you deem it to be trusted is you'll put it on a network isolation policy list. And I'll show you more about that in a second. And when it's on that list, then we'll make the determination that that site is trustworthy and it can open in Edge or IE on the host. If it's not on the list, then we assume it's untrusted, so that's going to open in isolation. So in this example, it's going to open in isolation because we didn't find it on the list, and then Edge would be obviously invoked within the container. So when we think about the compromise of a container, which is exactly what this is designed to do, is to isolate that, we think about how long that would persist, you know, on the running desktop. And so containers now, when you enable Application Guard, are going to isolate that activity for the lifetime of the user log on or until the user logs off. So assuming that the container is compromised, the attacker has full control of that container, they'll maintain control of that container until the user logs off or until the machine reboots, and then that container is discarded. The next time the user or another user logs on, then a brand new container is going to be built the way that I described. All right, so let's talk a little bit about setup and deployment. So in order to configure application guard, planning and preparation will be required. You may want to think about things like, should I target just a select group of users in the enterprise? Thinking about maybe who might be most at risk, or maybe a group that isn't necessarily at risk because they're not security conscious, but maybe their work role makes you concerned that if they were a target of an attack, that they have a lot to lose for the enterprise if their machine is compromised. So this might be your administrator work role. It might be your finance group. So you should go through that thought process. You can target application guard and policy to restricted groups with an Active Directory. So it's not an all or nothing. You can definitely isolate to just those groups that you would like to isolate their browser activity. So installing Application Guard, it is an optional feature, so you do need to enable that. And you'll want to configure policies based on what we've looked at so far. Like I said, we're shipping this secure by default. So this is why you're going to want to take the extra step and go through and think through policies to enable before you turn it on. And we do have a deployment guide. It's out on TechNet. So if you search for the Application Guard deployment guide, it's a pretty good guide, and it'll help you to guide and plan through your deployment. So one of the first things that you'll do is you'll want to configure the enterprise site list. So the site list that I was talking about, where you add your trusted sites on a site list, that is all configured in our network isolation policy stack. And you can find that by looking in group policy under the computer configuration node in administrative templates for network. And I'll show you where that's at. I'll walk through group policy in a moment. But you need to think about, not only the enterprise sites that are obvious, which is your intranet sites, but maybe what are the sites that your users go to on a routine basis that largely you trust. It could be news sites they go to, commerce sites they go to, banking sites, maybe your partner sites, if you deal with partner sites and they have an extranet. You can include those as well. And in that case, you may want those sites to open up on both the host as well as in the container. So when you're browsing in isolation and you have Edge and you're inside Application Guard, I mentioned that our new networking stack blocks the container from getting to the enterprise. You can't actually navigate from that container back onto a trusted site. So because of that, we've enabled you to add sites to the neutral site list in the middle with a special designator. And that allows sites to open on both the host and the container. That way, if the user's in isolation, they're not blocked in getting to those sites. For your corporate sites, you want to keep those, though, on the Enterprise Cloud Resources or the Enterprise Resources list. And then all other sites that aren't on these lists, they're going to open up in Application Guard. We talk more about all these different sites lists within the deployment guide. I know I went through that quickly, so you can consult that if you have questions. So when you configure your site lists, you can deploy those using group policy, SCCM, or Intune. So we give you all three options to be able to do that. And you'll have a flexibility within how you specify those top-level domains or IP ranges for your sites. So we're recommending that minimum memory for Application Guard for the best experience would be 8 gig of RAM. So usually your kind of modern laptops. You can run it on 4, and we'll give you instructions on how to enable that. But for the best experience, we recommend 8 gig. and similar technology from some of our partners. I think they recommend the same. As far as your CPU goes, we recommend quad-core or dual-core hyper-threading to quad-core. Disk gets better if it's not spinning media, just because, again, this is using Hyper-V, and it's using a virtual machine-based container. So depending on what the user's doing, there might be a lot of page swap going on. So it's better if it's a solid-state drive. It's on the Windows 10 Fall Creators Update, and it is enterprise SKU. So you'll need the Windows Client enterprise SKU for this. And obviously, you need to have a machine capable of running Hyper-V. So you'll need the Hyper-V-based extensions. So let's walk through configuration of policies at a high level before I jump directly into Group Policy Editor. So the first thing you'll do is you'll need to turn on Application Guard for the endpoints. You can do that on your own machine if you're going through Windows Insiders, like I spoke about. And you'll do that by going into the turn on and off optional Windows features, if you all know where that's at. If you don't, just simply go to Start menu in Windows and type turn on and off, and then you'll see the control panel list. And scroll down and find Windows Defender Application Guard, and you can turn it on there. You don't need to turn on Hyper-V explicitly in that same list. We'll take care of that. In fact, for your endpoints, when you deploy this, I recommend you don't turn on Hyper-V explicitly, because then you'll get the Hyper-V manager that the user would see. So we hide all that if you're just going to deploy Application Guard. So like I said, we have support for clipboard. You can control both which direction you're going to allow the clipboard to work, as well as what you're going to allow to be placed on the clipboard. We support text and images, and for direction, you can configure it to go the user to be able to copy from the host into the container to the host, or both directions. Our recommendation is that you don't enable from host to container, because that would be a way where a user could accidentally copy a corporate password over in the container, or might leak some corporate data into the container. But you can certainly do that depending on the risk profile that you have. For printers, I talked about this already. You can do the print as, XPS, PDF, network attached, local attached. We have the concept of being able to manage mixed content within a page. So think about a page that you might have on your intranet that is loading external content. So if you have like a page view counter that's out on some external site that you might have put an href in for, if you turn on strict mode, that would be blocked, because that would be an untrusted site. Though your local site will still render, but you might get like a little X where that thing was. If you don't like that, then you can have the relax mode set. And you can configure this in policy as well. I talked about cookies and web creds for the user to be able to use those when they're in isolation. And there is a switch in policy that you can enable that. We believe this is probably the best experience for users to take advantage of all of the features within Edge that they want to use. You'll want to turn on the persistence mode there for the user. We do have support for auditing. So we understand that many of you have compliance requirements, and you need to have audit logs for the host as well as for any virtual machines. So we've actually worked closely with our partners within the US government, as an example, to get requirements on what would be required for this type of scenario. I think NIST has actually published a draft for what they're going to suggest for settings for auditing for container-based features like this. The way that auditing works is that you'll go in and enable it in group policy, and we're going to pick up the policy that you've applied to the host for auditing within the container. So for your event log, for your system log, and for your security log, for your application log, all three of those we support, and they'll all get turned on by just turning on the auditing switch for the container. So as long as you've configured the policies for the host correctly, we'll just pick those up in the container. We're documenting the way that you can actually get at those logs in the container in the deployment guide. Coming in the future, we want to integrate with Windows Event forwarding as well. That way the logs can move out of the container automatically and go to your Windows Event forwarding collection points if you use that. So just to recap here, once you're ready to go, you'll need to install the feature. It's as simple as I said. You'll turn on Windows Defender Application Guard. You can also set that through group policy. You'll get your configuration set, and then you'll enable that, and you can use SCCM, group policy, or Intune. All right, so now I'll give you a look at the enterprise mode. So I'll just go ahead and close our Edge windows, and that way we can start from scratch there. So the first thing is, let's go and look at Group Policy Editor. And I've already opened up the node where you'll set your configuration settings here for Application Guard. And as I said, you'll come in underneath Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, and then you'll scroll down all the way down to Windows Defender Application Guard. And when you double click on that, you'll see the policies. We don't have a bunch. They're manageable, and this is where you'll do your configuration if you're going to use group policy. If you're using SCCM, you'll have a similar view there. Intune, same thing. So the first thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to enable Application Guard in enterprise mode. And this mode simply is telling Application Guard that you need to consult the policies and look at the network site list to automatically make a decision whether or not the user is going to be put into AppGuard. If you don't specify that mode, but you've turned on Application Guard, then the user can still use the standalone mode and be able to browse to untrusted sites on their own. So the next setting that I'll show you is for the data persistence. So this one, as I mentioned, is simply an on or off choice. So it's not granular to where you could control, I just want cookies or I just want passwords. So it's an all or nothing on this one, and this is where you set that. The next is for auditing events, and similar, we just talked about that, to persistence is it's just simply an on or off, and then you'll pick up the application events, system events, and security events, which are really the big ones for compliance. And the next is loading non-enterprise content in Microsoft Edge or IE, and that was the one that talked about strict or relaxed content filtering. So here's where you set this. When you enable this setting, and it says, non-enterprise content embedded on enterprise sites are stopped from opening in IE or Edge. So you'll want to make sure that there's nothing critical going on there before you set that setting, as well as understand that users may see some of those red X's and they may ask what's going on. Okay, the next two are a little more interesting. So enabling of the clipboard, and I'll just zoom this in so you can see it better. On this one, when you enable it, then you'll get the options that I talked about. And let me just move this up so you can see it better. So by default, it's blocked. So clipboard is not enabled when you first turn on Application Guard. So then the modes that I talked about are listed there. So you can enable that to go from the host to the container and the container to the host, or both directions. And then you have the option here of enabling options for what content you're going to allow. So let me just show you that. And if you scroll down in the group policy description, that's where you can get the decoder ring to see what you need to set. So if you set 1, it's going to allow text. If you set 2, it'll allow images. And then 3 will allow both text and images. So our concern here was, once application's been deployed, attackers clearly are going to look for ways that they can break out of the container. And we don't know what attackers are going to do. Back to the initial part of the talk, what's changed over the last 2 years? Well, what's going to change over the next 2 years with Application Guard? Will attackers figure out ways, to lure users into copying text strings that have malicious code in them? Who knows? So we wanted to give you the ability to have a feature like this that users could use, but if suddenly there becomes an attack vector, you could shut that down while we work on a fix for that. And then finally, the next setting is for printing. And for this one, it's the same idea. So once you enable that, then you can come in and you can set the printing that you're going to support. And we have support both in MDM and Intune, as well as SCCM for all the settings that I've shown you here. All right, and one more section in group policy. Thanks for sticking with me. I did talk about the fact that you do have to configure the network site list. So you're going to come into administrative templates in the network section. And you're going to come to network isolation. And in network isolation, this is where you'll actually configure your site lists. And like I said, the deployment guide explains all of this in detail, so you don't need to worry about taking notes here. But you'll notice things like enterprise resource domains hosted in the cloud. That's where you'd set up your cloud resources. So if you're using Office 365, you'd add those sites there. And you just do top-level domains. You add the sites into these lists, and then those will be the trusted sites. And those will open on the host, and they won't be in Application Guard. All right. Okay, so we've configured our policy, and I'll show you what it would look like. So now I just have Edge opened up, and I basically configured the policies in such a way that every site is considered untrusted that I might go to. So I'm going to type in an URL, but again, our main scenario that we're thinking about is the user clicking on a malicious link in an email where they're going to get lured to a site that an attacker controls. So in this case, you can see that I was automatically put into isolation in Edge in AppGuard by setting up the policy. So depending on how extensive you set up your site lists, the user may not go to the container during the course of their normal workday or very infrequently. But when they do go in the container, we want to make that count. And we want to make sure that you get the benefit of isolation when that happens. All right, so any questions on the demos while I'm here? Sure, if you want to jump to the mic.
So right where you're at right now, does each tab individually run in isolation mode, or if I'm in the Application Guard and now I hit one of my trusted sites, does it still now run in Application Guard mode because I'm in this window? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
That's a great question. I exactly know what you're trying to ask. Yeah, so let me show you, first of all, if I were to spawn a new tab here, and I could go to, I'll just keep it simple, and I'll go to Bing as well. And I can also come over here and go New Window, which will start another application guard window. And I could even get crazy and do New in Private Window, which would be both secure and anonymous. So everything that I did there stayed within the same container session. So we have a single container that will release in the next version. And every tab, every new window that you start is going to use the same instance of the container for the logged on session. Now, if I were to type in a trusted URL in the browser, that's the case where I said you can't navigate back. So what the user would see there is that they would see a message within the browser to say, you're trying to go to a site that application guard can't reach, go back to the host and start Edge there to reach that site. We're going to work on improving that experience in the future. The trick there is making sure that we can do that in a way that an attacker can't take control of that and try to force the user back onto the host and take control of that session. So we are working on that. Did that answer the question? Great. Any other questions while I've got the demos up?
One suggestion regarding copy and paste, so the clipboard settings. I think disabling the clipboard would be the best option for security, but we have to enable it because it's a kind of convenience to use copy-paste. But I know it from other products who then have a consent box. So if a script inside the container requests clipboard, so it can steal data from the host machine, but you can pop up a message box asking the user for consent, and that would lower the risk. So that is something I would like to see here. The other question is, you said uploads, downloads are not supported currently?
That's right.
Okay, but it's on the real roadmap, or?
So for uploading and downloading, I mean, those are two, we need to put them in separate buckets. So for uploading content, we view that the content on the host is enterprise content, and the whole reason that you've deployed Application Guard is you don't want your enterprise content being uploaded onto untrusted sites that the user would be on if they're in Application Guard. Downloading, we recognize that as a valid scenario. And that's why I said the workaround right now is you can use the print as. So we are looking at ways that we can enable that in the future, and we understand that there will be other applications that will be asked to isolate that will require the user being able to find the documents that they interact with in Application Guard. So we'll have to think through how that looks, but I don't have.
I think you already have this. You already have this service running, which communicates with the container and the host. Can these you can use this service for exchanging files? So, for example, if a user needs a document inside the container because of uploading it into the web interface, you can have, let's say, a right-click option in the Explorer, send to Application Guard, and then push the file into the container, and it sits then in the maybe downloads or uploads folder inside the container.
Yeah, there's a number of design options that we're looking at to enable that kind of capability. We haven't settled in on the exact one yet.
Okay. And another question regarding your network stack. Currently, this is only IPv4 enabled, or?
IPv4 for the container itself, but it's sitting behind our new HCS and HNS technology for WinNat. So the host itself can be talking IPv6. It's really a question about the container, and that's something that we have on our list. We're going to wait for customer feedback. And so if you hit an issue where v6 is required for the container, please let me know.
So I think currently you cannot access IPv6 only content,
Correct.
even if your host is IPv6 or dual stack.
Because we're using v4. Right?
What about plugins?
Plugins, so the plugins, really it's extensions for Edge, and we don't have support for extensions in this version. It is something that we're looking at.
Okay.
This is a great list.
And one other question is, a suggestion, enabling VPN inside the AppGuard so that you can separate the network traffic from the host machine and the container. So we like to make a VPN inside the AppGuard container and filter out the internet traffic to a certain point where it can be inspected and not get mixed up with the host network traffic.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So let me get through the rest of the deck here. We're right at the end, and then I'll open it back up for questions. Because this is a pretty exciting section that I want to be able to talk to you about. So we're really proud to announce the fact that we're going to have Windows Defender ATP integration with Application Guard. I don't know how many of you have been able to get by the security booth over in the expo, but you know, I worked in the booth the last couple of days, and there have been a lot of questions about Windows Defender ATP, and we're excited to talk about that. So Windows Defender ATP, for those who may not have been briefed on it yet, this is Microsoft's entry into a post-breach technology. So your enterprise can get behavioral data based on breach indicators of attack and be able to look at those in our Security Center console and to be able to take action to remediate the machines that might be affected. So you have a single pane of glass. It runs in the Microsoft Azure cloud, and your data is sent to the cloud, and it's sent by an agent that's included in Windows 10. You do need to be running Enterprise E5 SKU, and you need to subscribe to the service. And at the end of the presentation, I have a link that you can look at there if you haven't done a pilot or a trial yet. The integration that we've done for Application Guard was based on the fact that if you deploy Application Guard and you're isolating that untrusted user activity, i.e. those attacks where they're clicking on the malicious links, and if you don't know what's going on, you're somewhat blind to the fact that your enterprise might be under attack, because we are going to be doing a good job of isolating that activity so you wouldn't see it. So we've added the same sensor that runs on the host for Windows 10 for Windows Defender ATP in Application Guard in the container itself. So now the container is going to use the same technology to send those indicators of attack from the Microsoft Sense agent, which is the agent that's used by Windows Defender ATP, and it'll send them up to the Microsoft cloud based on the configuration that you've set in the enterprise for your tenant. So all of the same behavioral analysis and heuristics for files, processes, registry data, network packet data can be collected within the container and then sent on to Windows Defender ATP into the Windows Security Center console. So what you'll see when you have that integration, as is shown here, you'll see that there's actually Application Guard events that will appear. This is interesting because you won't need to worry about opening up a case on that machine necessarily, because you'll know that that attack was isolated in an Application Guard container. You'll be able to expand those nodes, and similarly, you'll be able to see that those happened in AppGuard. And you can even see that we have an Application Guard special icon that you'll see within your reports. And then you can also see any of the attack graphs that are related to that. So we're real excited about that integration. We think that'll give you the full picture when you're running both Defender ATP along with Windows Defender Application Guard. So I know we've covered a lot of real estate here today. The key point is that I'd like you to take away is that Windows Defender Application Guard containers are built on that next generation technology that came out of the server container team, that our container has been custom designed to isolate edge. We have minimized the attack surface on that container to ensure that malware can't run in that container by default. It'll be very difficult for attackers to compromise that container. Now, we chose Microsoft Edge to be the browser that we're going to isolate based on it being the most secure browser that we have, but IE11 is supported as well. Our integration with Windows Defender ATP will give you the full picture of the threats that your network is facing. Of course, we looked at both modes. You can use standalone mode to be able to evaluate the feature, or even if you just want to get it into the hands of your users now without forcing them to go into Application Guard, that might even be something that you could take a look at as kind of a trial. Obviously, turning on enterprise mode is what we recommend. That will give you the best assurity that you're going to stop those attacks that we talked about at the beginning of the talk and change that attacker playbook. It's available in the Windows 10 Fall Creators Update, and it does require that you have the Windows 10 Enterprise Edition to be able to use it. So I did say I'll show you how you can get access. So if you're not already a Microsoft TAP customer, here's how you can join TAP. We have Windows Insiders. I know you all know this stuff, but just in case, that's how you go take a look at Insiders. And then for the Windows Defender ATP trial, they're offering a 90-day trial, and you can go to that link below, aka.mswdatp. And I was talking to the Windows Defender ATP program manager yesterday, and they'll take a very large number of endpoints in that trial. So if you want to know the exact number, go by the booth and ask for the specifics. So whether your company is small or large, you should take a look at that. And encourage you to give feedback on the session. We take that feedback seriously, and it helps us improve. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and invite anyone who would like to ask a question to feel free to come up to the mic. We still have about 17 minutes, so yeah, feel free.
So I was wondering, why is the container destroyed only during log off or restart? Why wouldn't it be closed when you close the last window?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I talked about how we dynamically create our container based on the OS on the endpoint, that takes some time to be able to do that. And we don't want the user to be slowed down in carrying out their work on the PC. If we were discarding the container every time they close a session, then if they open up another browsing session, and if we're having to generate a new container on the fly, then that wouldn't be a great experience. So we're working on coming up with a way to be able to discard the containers and have a fresh container for every new browsing session. So that's the reason why it really came down to the performance, but also having the security assurity of creating a good container.
Okay, and the second question, what's your timeline in supporting other applications? And what are the next applications that you're considering to support?
So we're looking at support for additional applications. We don't have an exact milestone in mind. We're waiting for customers that deploy Application Guard to weigh in and to let us know what they think we should be focused on next. So I welcome your feedback on that,
okay.
On which one you think we should do next.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. In connection to this question, you said it takes time to build this container, and you do it only when the user logs off and logs
Correct.
on again.
Right.
So our users don't log off, so maybe once a month, if security updates force them to do so,
Okay.
they would restart.
Right.
So malware sitting inside the container can live very long. What about taking after building the container, taking a snapshot, and each time or periodically reverting to this clean snapshot, because this process of building a container is time consuming and not the powering up. Mm-hmm. And about additional applications, or is it maybe possible to give us a solution to use this technology to make our own containers with this mindset? So or to alter the edge container. So for example, I said we like to put in kind of VPN client or so, or tune the settings or do things which are maybe not in a broad interest, but in our
to have
interest.
containers
So,
as a platform.
yeah,
right?
so how to tweak the container building to put in some special settings, maybe some add-ons we like to put in, and this kind of things.
Right, and the solution there really is the server-based containers
Yeah.
that we have in Windows Server containers and Hyper-V-based containers. That's a great requirement to give us, and I take it happily, and I'll take it back to our container team. But at this point, we don't have a plan right now to have client-based containers that emulate the behaviors of the server-based containers, which have the features that you described. Yeah. But I'm happy to take that feedback. Sure.
Just had a quick question. Do you guys have any, so right now between IE, Edge, Enterprise Mode, Site List, do you have a lot of bouncing back and forth behavior going on with the browsers as it is for a lot of corporations that have adopted this technology? So this is something we'd love to do, but now we're going to have another bounce that a user is going to have. It's just a really horrible user experience by the time you're done with it, right? So you go to like your company homepage, maybe that's like updated. Now you go to a client portal, they got to hop in IE. Now they go outside of to something that's flagged as being application guard, and it's going to spawn a new window. Is there any intent, I mean, at a minimum, to make the virtualized app sit like alongside tabs, even in the same browser? I know it sounds silly, but from like a user experience piece, it would just be a lot better if they had like an orange tab as opposed to a brand new window pop-up. And also the splash screen, I would, taking that out, that's like, you guys should do that right away, because it's just like, it draws even more attention to this kind of ugly experience.
We appreciate that feedback. So the reason we put the splash screen there is we wanted the user to know that we were getting their browser started, that if they were going to sit there for more than a few seconds, that we didn't want them thinking that the session wasn't going to start at all. But yeah, we get that completely, and that is our goal, is we want to get rid of the splash screen.
How about like making the tabs alongside? Is there any intent for that, or
Yeah, so integrating tabs that's something that we're looking at as well. Having a composited view where you can have your AppGuard tabs alongside tabs that are in the browser, and that's something that we're looking at as well.
Because if you guys had that would probably be the biggest thing for, I mean, us in terms of, this is a great product.
Appreciate that.
But we just got to worry about, like, we don't want it to be, we looked at a similar third-party product, and we used to call that product the Get Off IE product, because it made the experience so bad that user's just going to install Chrome to get around it. And I have a feeling if we did this, that would be what happens. But if it was a little bit nicer, I think they would just go along.
Sure. Yeah, and I would say that that's why we've enabled the concept of the neutral site list.
Yeah.
To where you can have sites that'll open in both the container or on the host.
Yeah.
And that might be one way to approach it. Because there's two schools of thought. One is, I don't trust anything on the internet, so I'm not putting any internet sites on the neutral site list. The other school of thought is only the super dangerous stuff should ever open in the container and slow down my user. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and list all the sites that I think my users go to based on intelligence that you might have on their browsing behavior. Put those on there, and then it really is just those bad links they click on.
Okay, but all right, thanks.
Yeah, I'd like the feedback, though. Thank you. And feel free to send me feedback, too. It's just chazj@microsoft.com. Okay. Yes?
So I actually have two things, but the first one's really quick. Windows 10 Enterprise, in this regard, feature compatible with Windows Education?
So we don't have support in the education SKU now, but that's, again, something, if you want to send me a requirement on that, and tell me that that would be useful, that helps me build the case. Okay, very good. And the other one is more of a comment, as you talked about where this might lead to, and I think about our administrators, our domain administrators, and best practice in the past has been either a whole separate PC or we run virtual instances we drop in on top, but that requires me now to manage this whole set of virtual instances. Is there any thought about
containerizing the desktop or the administration functions through AppGuard?
As far as just for your admins and
Yes.
their work role.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yes, we are aware of like whether it's called a secure admin workstation or privilege access workstation and the use of virtual machines there. We're working on figuring out a way that we can have some sort of a recommendation how you could use Application Guard in those scenarios. Since we only isolate Edge right now, if there are other tools that an admin would need to use and you'd want those isolated, that's the challenge.
Right.
But we are thinking about that. So again, I'd welcome your feedback on what you think the right things would be to isolate.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
A couple things. You mentioned there was no need to turn on the Hyper-V feature on the client. What about the container feature?
And you don't need to turn on the
On that one
container
either.
feature
Okay.
either. And you
Great.
saw that in there, yeah.
Yeah,
So.
okay. Second question was, last time I looked at the containers, which would have been prior to 1703, it seemed extremely difficult for me to put something in there and get a user interface element integrated back in with the desktop. The changes that you made here, are they in the container that would now allow that, or you actually did something outside of that to make that work?
Yeah, so Application Guard is a completely isolated container that was designed, like I said, just for Edge. So it's not extensible. That was the question the gentleman over here had too. So this has nothing to do with that container node that you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I will add, don't be concerned when you turn on Application Guard. You won't see Hyper-V get checked in the turn on and off Windows features, and that's by design because we're not installing all the components for Hyper-V, just what we need. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm just really curious about the AppGuard. In real world, let's say I have enabled AppGuard completely, and then the user received an email or a message through messaging app or something like that with a link, and then click on that one. Will it automatically copy the URL to the container or something like that, or not really?
So any navigation request from any application that invokes the IE or the Edge stack for that will pick up and direct into the container. And that's really the trick. So whatever the default browser is on the host is where we'll be in that flow. But if you're using a third-party browser as the default, and by clicking in an app on a link, if that causes that third-party browser to grab that navigation request, then we won't see it.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah, because
okay.
we've actually, our code sits within IE and within Edge
All right. Okay. Understood.
to intercept those.
So that's important. I mean, the default browser should be Edge first.
Should be Edge or
Okay.
IE. It can be
IE.
it can be IE11 or Edge. Yeah. So
Okay.
you know you can have your browser. You can still have your users be able to use third-party browsers. You'll just want to ensure that the default set on your endpoints is
Alright.
IE or Edge.
And then definitely once they click on that link, it will actually go or copied to the container, right?
If it's not on the trusted site list that you create. Correct.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm still a little bit concerned about these one container which will be kept until the user logs off and logs on, because theoretically, and I think also in practice, what will happen if you serve to a site which is infected, then the VM will be infected. So how does a user ensure that when he opens another session, let's say to administer a server or something like that, then he will be in an infected virtual machine? And especially if you plan to give the possibility to transfer files, to copy files in later on versions, I see that as a big risk. I would like to have that the user has a possibility to say destroy the VM, and I take that into account that it takes another 10 seconds to build up a new VM, but I feel better that way.
I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
I totally understand. And I'd say one thing that you could look at is if you do have some users that are in these work roles like administrators, and you're concerned about this right now, and you don't want to force them to log off each time to get a new container. We do support multiple containers with fast user switching. So they could have their standard user logged on to the machine, and that they could use that container to go browse the internet and then have another user logged on, which is their admin role, and keep that separate. And that would be a separate container. And that one, they don't browse the internet, but maybe they could get lured into clicking on a link or something. You'd still have isolation, but you wouldn't have such a risk of the container being contaminated.
Okay, so but I guess then you need more than 8 GB of RAM.
Well, we pause the containers in that case.
Ah, okay.
Because when you fast user switch, we pause the container that's associated with the first account.
Ah, okay.
And then allow the other one to run. Because you're right, it's all about how much memory we commit, right? So when the container is running, we're going to commit as much memory as required by Edge.
Yeah, because I have the fear that the user believes so much in that solutions that he, administrator, he opens another window in the app guard looking Netflix or something like that, makes a typo and is connected to a infected site. And so that's what I'm a little bit worried about.
Yeah, I
Okay, thank you.
appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Great presentation. One question regarding the exception sites. How do you manage them? Because I assume it will be, I don't know, hundreds of sites, and to do it manually, it might be a little bit of a hassle for the administrators. So any kind of import, or also how long does it take to import new sites and until they are reflected on the clients?
Yeah, so I'll take the last question first. So how long does it take for the sites that you add onto the network isolation list to get reflected in the client? The same amount of time as it takes for your group policy to update in your enterprise. Okay. So it's just really change to group policy object when that gets pushed. It's usually, some enterprises are every 90 minutes, some are faster, and it depends on if you're using SCCM or Intune. So nothing different there. As far as an exception list, same thing. I don't want to sound like a broken record. I would love your feedback on that. So if you can let me know the types of lists you maintain now and where tools would be useful to be able to convert those into isolation policies. For example, if you created an extensive IE trusted site list and you already have a bunch of trusted sites there and you just would like a tool to create, an XML that can be imported, I'd like to know that. Same time, if you have different types of site lists elsewhere that you'd like imported, that would be good. We are working hard to try to simplify the site list policies and to maybe even have a way to allow enterprises to take advantage of, Microsoft-controlled reputation for sites, to be able to automatically use AppGuard without you having to create a site list of your own.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Any final questions? All right, well, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it. And again, it's just Chaz, J, C-H-A-S-J @Microsoft.com, and I welcome any feedback you have. So, thank you.